So this was a pretty significant piece of news yesterday, I think, in the Bitcoin world because a lot of people are using these YubiKeys. So this is from Bitcoin News, sponsor of the show. Big shout out to them. The YubiKey 5, a widely used hardware token for two-factor authentication, has a cryptographic flaw that makes it vulnerable to cloning if an attacker briefly gains physical access. This flaw, known as a side channel, exists in the microcontroller used in many authentication devices, including bank smart cards, electronic passports, and secure access systems. So I don't know, is there any people using a YubiKey? I'm sure there is in this chat. But it looks like it says it makes it vulnerable to cloning if an attacker briefly gains physical access to it. So kind of where I wanted to go with this, and I think the most important part of this, just like everything, we see these pieces of news in terms of like Trezor, Ledger, YubiKey, whatever it is this week. There's vulnerabilities, I think, built within every piece of hardware here and software, I believe. So, and I mean, if you really think about it, like, where are all these devices coming from? There's hardly anything that's made in the US anymore. I think that Jack Dorsey is one of the people who's trying to push this forward to make them more, to increase production in the US and limit our exposure and our reliance on China. But we're not there yet. I mean, the majority of mining or the ASICs, the chips, all this stuff comes from China. So is it any surprise that all of them have backdoors, side doors, side channels, vulnerabilities in them? It's 0% surprising to me. So the main thing that I kind of wanted to talk about with this is that you have to make sure within your setup that you're not relying on a device. We talked about the single point of failure yesterday and how dangerous that is if you have a substantial amount of Bitcoin, to be holding your Bitcoin on one device, even if done properly, even if you have the 12 words written down on steel, hidden somewhere in your house, even then, it's still a single point of failure. So you have to look at that and you have to figure out how to counteract that. But the second part of that is that I would just assume that whatever device you use, whether it's a Trezor, a Coldcard, a Passport, Blockstream Jade, whatever device you're using, just assume that somebody could access that. I don't know how. It just seems like once a week there's something like this news coming out that there's a vulnerability within it. So just assume that your device somehow, somebody somewhere could gain access to it. Just assume that. So what you want to do then with that is you have to limit the amount that they can get. So let's say you have a Coldcard. And let's say, like I said, you did everything right. You did the 24 words, you memorized it, you have it in a safe, fireproof safe, untouchable. You're good. But let's say that there's a vulnerability that comes out within Coldcard that says all of the, somehow, again, I doubt this is possible. I'm just saying to assume that this is going to happen. You have to. Unless you know better than me, and you might, but this is what I'm going to assume. So the way you deal with that is you actually set up a passphrase. You add the 25th word there, you create it, and you store it somewhere that's not in their ability to get, in your head or somewhere in your house, whatever that is. You have to just add another layer of security on top of that, another layer of randomness to it that they wouldn't have any way to get. That's what I'm saying. Right? So if you make a passphrase on your Coldcard, because the Coldcard never connects to the internet, they would have no way of getting that back their way, right? So just assume the worst. Assume that whatever device you have, there's going to be a news article saying that device has been compromised. So you have to set yourself up in a way that even if that happens, you're going to be safe. You always want to, and I'm going to talk about this. There's a couple questions I want to talk about as well. But you always want to just not be the lowest hanging fruit. That's kind of like a really good way to look at it. So if you don't have a passphrase yet, make that a priority, honestly. You don't have to go full out multi-signature, full out multi-jurisdictional. Just start with a passphrase. Start with that.